Well, I think we need to take Greg Martin's story has been given to the corrupt military, and it has been given for motives that were not clear. And so I think it points out that if there is a act of social justice or creation of schools or helping something, that's going to create a lot more goodwill for America than the typical aid to Pakistan that has been wasted over the last 5 decades.
How will it take U.S. to actually hear in these, intellectual conversations that, the U.S. foreign policy towards developing countries needs to change, and then they should be investing more on a social basis than on a military, but it's been going on for Pakistan at least for 5-6 years. What will it take U.S. our politics to know and actually act upon it? Because there are clearly think tanks which are talking about that. There are already people who are the discussions have been going on, but it seems like it doesn't get to the White House, or the people in politics actually are still sticking to the old style of politics, which is feeding into the military and not on the social sector. Is it just ignorance on our part, or is it
No, it's not ignorant. The reality before either side is a very stark one. I mean, if you're working in the American foreign policy establishment, you have a choice between a corrupt liberal elite that and a possible uncertain, perhaps more Islamist government that might come in its place. So there's really, I mean, it doesn't, that's been the trend of American foreign policy for a very long time with a lot of countries. That is precisely, for example, what we did in Egypt for a very, very long time. We supported the Mubarak regime because we knew that they were not Islamist, and we also sort of turned our back or looked away when that government, the Mubarak regime, gave handouts to Islamists to keep them, sort of under their thumb. And so the problem with that situation, you see it replicated in Pakistan, is that what do you really do in a situation like that? I mean, do you say, okay, we're not going to support, I mean, because the fact is that a lot of the current establishment, it doesn't matter whether the Pakistani political establishment is led by one party or the other. All of the current parties, as we talked about, are replications that I haven't seen anybody else, my entire lifetime, except the same players being recycled, regardless of which side they're on. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the People's Party or the Nawaz Sharif or whoever. And so that's the quandary, and everybody's sort of waiting and watching, and I mean, it's a stark choice. Do you pick a corrupt liberal elite, or do you say these Islamists that are gaining power, we're just going to let that happen? So that's the American position. The problem, I think, in Pakistan, and you always hope that it would go, for example, in a direction like Egypt, where there was a lot of American meddling, but a new young generation said, you know what, yes, we've had a lot of meddling, we have a history of colonialism, imperialism, all of that, but we're going to take back our country and we're going to do it this way. And it's going to take them time, undoubtedly, and it's not a perfect revolution, but they decided to say that we're going to get over this, constant anti-Americanism that just is, in some ways a process of navel-gazing where you just say, well, America's so bad. And then there's like nothing else after that. Well, America's so bad, and then what then, right? So you hope they will go in the Egyptian direction, but you don't know if that will happen, because unlike in Egypt, the U.S. has a tangible presence in Pakistan. So when you've got this elephant in the room, it's impossible for anyone to see anything else or look at internal problems. And then the other side is that because politics has become so hard for young people to get into, mostly because it's very dangerous. I mean, it's very, very dangerous in Pakistan to be in politics unless you have a family that's powerful enough to provide you a lot of security and revenge if you're killed. So what has happened then is that there's been all this social and cultural transformation because people have rejected the political sphere as an area where they can have a voice. So you see a very, very visible, religious revivalism, socially, culturally, and that's what's transforming things. So for me, the problematic part is also that the political sphere, which is supposed to represent change and supposed to sort of absorb all these ideas, is really not something that anybody really looks to anymore, other than entertainment in a sense, because they've now got 20 channels which are at any time of the day or night are broadcasting these very sensationalized sort of brawls between politicians, and everybody just talks at each other and then goes to sleep, and that's that. So it's in those terms, I mean, it's a complex situation where you can't just say, well, and it goes actually to this Greg Mortensen question. I'll give you an example of this king-making that was very sad, is that, I was working at that time in DC, and I remember, where they were distributing that book to congressmen to read as part of like a sort of, I guess, foreign policy thing, but that's terrible because that book is good, but it's not a foreign policy treatise. And if you're sitting on the foreign policy committee having to make decisions about whatever related to Pakistan, I mean, yeah, that's a good morale booster. But what they did is plug it in the completely wrong direction. There is no easy recipe where you can say, let's just build these schools and call it a day, and tomorrow, Pakistan's going to come out a well-functioning democracy where people have a voice in the political system. And that's always frustrating. So, I mean, there are many sort of little pegs to this, right?
What can we do to affect American foreign policy?
Right. Like, just for the fact, like, I think when you go to these debates and everybody is talking about that, yes, this needs to be done and our foreign policies are not correct, but then it doesn't look like the message is being transferred to actually the policymakers.
So I don't know how this is, I'm going to draw another analogy. I don't know how this plays in a place like Indianapolis, but the Obama administration showed remarkably little concern for the creation of jobs for Americans who have lost their jobs and having a lot of trouble paying their mortgages until people went out on the streets. And I have never been somebody who was eager to go out on the streets. I'm not a chanter, and I never wanted to be a political writer either. I just wanted to write books and then sit back and let everybody tell me how great my books were, But I've become more and more political, and I think this is a time to be political in America. And I point that out on the domestic front, particularly because I think it is directly relevant to foreign policy as well. I don't think that the population of this country is going to have any influence on the establishment of this country, either in on the domestic side or on the foreign policy side, unless we engage in politics beyond just voting. And I think that means going out on the street and making sure that our voices are heard.
And I have a story about that, is that